Welcome back. So this lesson is going to be very quick. We're just going to talk about two tags, the div tag and the span tag. And we really can't talk much as far as what they do and how we use them until we get to CSS where we can style things. But I just want to introduce them to you because I'm going to be showing you things using divs and span in the next few videos. So let's get started talking about divs and spans. First thing I'll say is that for both of them, as I mentioned before, are not that useful until we get to styling elements. But what they do is they allow us to group content together. So a div, according to MDN, is just a generic container. So it's just a way of grouping things together. As an example, now I'm not going to say that this is a div right here, but this could be a div, just a box around some content. To group all that together and give it a background, you could do that with a div. Again, we haven't talked about how you can do that just yet, but the idea is that you can just group things together. So you'll be seeing me use divs a lot in this series going forward. And let me just show you a quick example. So if I add some text here, and check this out, if I just type lorem and hit tab, it will give us some lorem ipsum, basically just a bunch of sample text, placeholder text that we can use. So I use this. Make two of those, and then I'll add an H1 here, and let's just say that this is a paragraph. And now I want to group these two things together, the H1 in the paragraph. So let's say eventually, and again, we can't do it now, but eventually I want to have an orange border around these, but it doesn't include this here. And what I can do is group them together in a div tag. And save. And if I refresh the page, it's not going to look different at all. It's not going to look like anything actually, because there's no styling for us to see. All that's happened is that these two things are now grouped in a container, just a generic box, a container to hold them together that we can go back and style them later. So if I gave that div a background, and if I made that have a yellow background, then that yellow background would roughly go around this, but it would not include any of the second paragraph. So that's a div. A span, on the other hand, is also a generic container, but there's a key difference. So let me start with an example here. So let's say I want to highlight these words right here. I want to make this yellow rather than black. So the rest of the text is black, but I want to highlight this as yellow and make the font bigger or something. Again, we don't know how to do that yet, but the idea is I would need a tag around this. And if I put a div right here, which is a generic container, and I save and refresh, you'll see that it gets knocked down into a new line. And that's because a div is a block level element. So that means that it takes up its own line, just like paragraph does. When you add a paragraph in, everything after that paragraph is pushed down to a new line. So a div is a block level generic container. And if I replace this with a span, this is not going to be very impressive at all. You're not going to see anything really. Well, you'll see that it changed here, but it will look like a regular paragraph. So I'm going to refresh. And now there's a generic span around this content here, but it's not doing anything. Unlike a div though, it's an inline container. So a span is basically for grouping content or selecting content inline, and a div is another way of grouping content, but it's a block level element. So I know this is a little bit theoretical at this point, or it's kind of hard to understand the utility of, but very soon when we get to CSS, we'll be able to say something like, go find that span that I added in and make it a 15-point font in yellow, or go find that div I added in and give it an orange border, and we'll end up with an orange border around this content. All right, great. Divs, spans, generic containers, one is block, one is inline.